In every organization, there's one group holding the whole operation together. Not the top, not the bottom, the middle. Today, 3 of the sharpest minds in middle management step up to the mic. Lisa Robyn Wood, Sally Foley-Lewis, and Jeff Sigel. Each brings a different lens, one shared mission. Decode what it really takes to lead from the middle with confidence, clarity, and impact. Same questions, 3 perspectives. Get ready for insight that cuts through the noise and goes straight to the operational heartbeat of your organization. Let's dive in.
This is such a great question, and one that I can really truly respond to authentically from my first-hand experience. When I stepped into a middle management role in my career, I was a high performer, and I think what you are not prepared for when you step into middle management is the shift in your role and responsibilities and what is required of you, which I don't think is ever really clearly articulated or is specifically articulated to prepare you for what your role and what your responsibilities now are. And specifically what I'm referring to is actually how they need to be conducted, because you're no longer the expert. You're no longer the doer, the deliverer. Actually, you are supporting others to succeed. You're supporting others to do the do. And that is a completely different shift in skill set. That requires a real strong skill set in communication and clarity, being able to clarify, coaching individuals, really enabling their development. And I think if that is new to you, stepping into middle management can be quite a shock. I think also where the challenge can often be is how you now need to really focus on your relationships, not just those with your team, but those with your peers, your stakeholders and senior leaders. Actually, your ability to influence, negotiate, tell a story becomes so critical to your success. I think the other element here is that individuals struggle because, from my experience, but it's also what I still witness with my clients, is the fact that actually the support for you lessens. And I'm not saying that's correct. That's very much what I advocate to be different in the work that I do as a coach and a trainer. But the reality is it often lessens. So the expectation is that you're more self-reliant, you're more self-sufficient, that actually you're able to cope. That's why you've been promoted into this position, because you're so capable. But the reality is we all need support ongoing at any stages in our life and careers. We never stop learning. We never stop having needs. And I think that becomes very absent as you go up an organisation, but it's particularly absent in that middle management layer. Execs often still get invested in quite heavily with coaching and mentorship, and obviously in the junior levels of management you get a lot of support, potentially in a lot of organisations with formal training, but I think that is really lacking in the middle management layer. And I think also, fundamentally being in the middle is a high pressured environment. You are being so heavily relied upon from all levels, and you need to be something to everybody. You need to be able to manage the day-to-day operations. You need to be able to get into the detail, but you also need to be able to think strategically and more visionary, and therefore think much more broader and wider. You need to be creative. You need to be a problem solver. You need to be a relationship builder. You need to be able to do many, many different things. And I think that can often be such a juggle as your identity shifts.
There possibly could be a bit of a support group starting here, because I too was a massive high performer, really keen, really eager, and ran headfirst into a brick wall called middle management in my early days, as well as what Lisa was talking about. When high performers step into middle management, the challenge isn't necessarily capability. It is to some degree, but I think it's got a lot to do with context, because you don't suddenly lose your talent. You definitely suddenly inherit a whole lot of complexity. And middle managers sit in the most crowded intersection of an organisation. Strategy coming down, reality coming up, and stakeholders coming in from everywhere. And everyone wants something yesterday. And high performers are used to clear goals, visible wins, and personal control over the outcomes as an individual contributor, right? Well, middle management, on the other hand, is built on influence, alignment, shared accountability, inspiring down, collaborating across, influencing up. And that's a different game. The real pressure point isn't the workload necessarily, it's the ambiguity. You're accountable for results you don't fully get to control. You're expected to lead change you might not have any part to play in designing. You're responsible for performance you can't personally deliver. You know, this mismatch or this distance as such creates a bit of friction. And then there's the emotional load as well. Middle managers absorb the tension of the organisation. They buffer change, they manage resistance, they translate decisions, they hold the line when things get really messy. So that invisible labour of that emotional labour doesn't show up on any KPIs, but it certainly shows up in the burnout we're seeing, and particularly for high performers. And high performers also struggle because success now looks a little bit more quieter. Less spotlight, more long game, more progress through others. You know, the dopamine hit of I nailed it gets replaced with we got there together, and we need to be able to make that shift so that we don't lose that dopamine hit as such. It's still valuable for sure, but sometimes just a bit harder to measure if we don't make that shift in ourselves as high performers. And the fix is definitely not about working harder, it's about working differently and having that mindset shift. And so we want to put clarity over chaos, we want to put influence over instruction, and we want to put systems ahead of heroics. You know, when organizations invest in middle managers properly, they don't just lift the performance, they end out stabilizing culture, they strengthen execution, and they definitely future-proof leadership across the whole organization. And middle management isn't the messy middle, it's the performance engine. And so those engines need tuning, not just tougher drivers.
You know, I love this question, and I am so excited about both Sally's and Lisa's answers because they I think, are spot on with the way I think about this. And so I think what I'll add to the conversation is this, that most high performers who are promoted into middle management are high performers in the task that they do. So a high-performing accountant, suddenly somebody goes, oh, wow, that person is so great at doing accounting that they could lead other accountants. And the thing that makes the middle so challenging is that nobody tells them that the thing that they were a high performer at before, which was accounting, is not really the thing that they're doing anymore. What they're doing now is leading. And the result that you get from this is that you get people who, instead of trying to lead a group of accountants as the middle manager over accountants, they try to do accounting through other people, which is problematic on so many levels, right? First of all, it's very hard to do work through other people. People don't like to be controlled in that way, right? And secondly, you get into this mode where you're like, wow, this person isn't doing it exactly the way I would do it. They're not doing it the level I would do it, the quality I would do it. And your natural reaction is to then jump in and do the stuff yourself because you were so good at it. And so the big challenge I see is that when you go from doing something every day that you are really, really good at, to doing something every day, namely leading, influencing, and sort of providing air cover, et cetera, for your team that you're not so good at, your natural inclination is to go back to that thing that you really knew, because you want to feel that sense of mastery that you had before, because you don't remember what it was like, years and years ago when you had no mastery of accounting and you had to figure it out and it was hard. So it's a big leap forward when you go from being an accountant to a manager of accountants, but it's also sort of a big leap backward in the sense that you go from mastery to a new set of skills that you need to master. I think this gets compounded by the fact that often the people above the middle manager, sort of look at the situation, in a similar way. They say, wow, this person was so good at doing accounting, so they will therefore be good at leading accountants. It creates this further pressure where they get, where the boss of that middle manager is kind of going, this person's going to be fine. I don't need to help them. I don't need to coach them. So I think the thing that is most important, in sort of understanding why middle managers struggle and what they need in order to get past that struggle is to recognize that they are doing something totally different than what they've done in the past, and that they need a different type of coaching, training, leadership, etc., to become really good at doing this new thing and gain that same level of mastery of leading people that they had of doing the task that they're leading.
You've just heard from 3 leaders who have dedicated their careers to strengthening the heartbeat of every organization, the middle. From Cape Town, Robyn Wood is the middle manager coach. Her own leap into senior middle management sparked the confidence crisis that transformed her life and career. Today, she helps managers rebuild their confidence, sharpen their self-awareness, and thrive through GRIP Coaching's practical, high-impact development programs. Sally Foley-Lewis has spent over 20 years in the trenches and the boardroom, working with more than 20,000 managers across industries and continents. She's a global award-winning speaker, author, and educator who equips managers to be confident, capable, and courageous, and delivers the tools that lift performance fast. Jeff Sigel brings more than 2 decades across global food, grocery, and restaurant giants and a mission to build better workplaces from the inside out. He's a coach, author of The Middle Matters, helping leaders at every level increase their impact. 3 experts, 1 shared passion, helping middle managers succeed where it matters most. Stay connected, keep developing, and keep leading from the middle.